What if I told you that one of the most iconic moments in the women's liberation movement wasn't born from activism, but from a corporate PR stunt designed to manipulate your deepest desires? Picture it. New York City, Easter Sunday, 1929. Crowds gather in their finest attire, the city buzzing with celebration. Suddenly, dozens of elegant, fashionable women strike a match and raise their cigarettes high into the air, smoking in public something once reserved only for rebels and women of ill repute. But now they proudly call them torches of freedom. The crowd gasps, the cameras roll, the world watches. It looked like a spontaneous act of rebellion, a bold cry for equality, a striking image of modern female emancipation. But what those women didn't realize was that they had just become the centerpiece in one of the first orchestrated social engineering experiments of the modern era. Behind the curtain stood one man, Edward Bernays. The nephew of Sigmund Freud, Bernays was no ordinary advertiser. He wasn't just selling cigarettes, he was selling identity. Using his uncle's groundbreaking theories of the unconscious mind, Bernays realized something revolutionary. You don't have to sell a product. You just need to sell a dream, a feeling, a sense of belonging. Attach an emotional narrative to a habit, and you can turn a vice into a virtue. And that's exactly what he did. By tapping into the social movements of the time and wrapping tobacco in the shimmering cloth of female empowerment, Bernays transformed Lucky Strike cigarettes into a symbol of liberation. Sales skyrocketed. But more importantly, a new age had dawned, the age of the engineering of consent. And it didn't stop there. What you're about to uncover isn't some shallow conspiracy or fringe theory. This is about something far more insidious. We're diving into a hidden architecture of control embedded so deeply within our collective psyche that most people not only accept it, they passionately defend it. Welcome to the anatomy of mass manipulation, a world where invisible hands shape what you believe, what you desire, and even who you think you are. Fast forward nearly a century. Today you live in an evolved, far more sophisticated version of that original manipulation. Every product you crave, every opinion you hold, every debate you think you're having, all choreographed, carefully nudged into place by forces that operate in the shadows of perception. Still think you are free? When Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman released Manufacturing Consent in 1988, they didn't just critique the media. They exposed a system of filter that determines not only what we think about, but what we're even allowed to think about. Every news story you scroll past, every show you binge on Netflix, every viral clip that clogs your feed, they're not neutral. Each one carries with it a subtle payload serving the hidden agendas of those who control the flow of information. And here's the kicker most of us never notice. Misinformation isn't just a glitch in the system, it's a feature. Entire social media platforms have become breeding grounds for propaganda. False narratives spread faster than wildfire, and fact-checking is now seen as censorship. Meanwhile, those in control quietly shape your worldview, feeding you just enough outrage to keep you scrolling, but never enough truth to wake you up. Let's rewind a bit. After the Vietnam War, U.S. military analysts faced a troubling revelation. The American public had developed what they called a sickly inhibition against violence. In other words, people had grown too empathetic, too unwilling to support future wars. And for an empire built on military dominance, that posed a serious problem. Enter Hollywood. As investigative journalist David Robb detailed in Operation Hollywood, the U.S. Department of Defense has collaborated with film studios for decades, offering funding, equipment, and technical advice in exchange for script approval. But this wasn't just about portraying the military accurately, it was about shaping cultural narratives. Movies like Rambo weren't entertainment, they were subtle reprogramming tools. Carefully crafted psychological operations designed to rekindle patriotism, justify intervention, and glorify violence. Through film, the Pentagon rewired the public's emotional response to war, priming an entire generation to cheer for battles they didn't understand. They don't even need to lie. All they have to do is choose which truth to show you and how to frame it. The result? Decades of interventions, wars, occupations, all met with a strangely numb public response. Consent manufactured not through force but through fiction. But the most powerful tool in this psychological arsenal isn't media. It's not even propaganda in the traditional sense. It's something much older. It's distraction. The ancient Romans understood this perfectly. Panem et circenses, bread and circuses. Keep the masses fed and entertained, and they'll never ask who's pulling the strings. But today, that idea has been upgraded into a science. Your favorite apps, the games you play, the content you consume, all engineered by behavioral scientists who understand how to hijack your attention and exploit your neurochemistry. Tristan Harris, a former Google design ethicist, revealed this in The Social Dilemma. He exposed how platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram are built on dopamine feedback loops, keeping you addicted, not because of what you see, but because of how it makes you feel. The scrolling never ends because the system was designed to never let you go. It's not about keeping you informed. It's about keeping you occupied, because as long as your mind is caught in an endless loop of stimulation, you won't question the system. You won't think deeply. You won't rebel. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you sat in silence and reflected on your life, or picked up a book and read uninterrupted for more than 10 minutes, or sat with discomfort instead of numbing it? As Aldous Huxley once said, you don't have to burn books to destroy a culture. Just get people to stop reading them. That's exactly what's happened. And the consequences go deeper than you might imagine. Formal education, the one place where critical thinking should be nurtured, has also been captured. Curriculums are carefully curated to produce compliance, not consciousness. Instead of teaching students how to think, most institutions focus on teaching them what to think. Controversial subjects are avoided. History is sanitized. Philosophy is reduced to trivia. The goal: create a population smart enough to operate machines and follow protocols, but not wise enough to challenge authority. You'll get a degree, maybe even a good job, but not the tools to truly understand the world around you. Universities have become echo chambers for ideological reproduction. Students leave with certificates, but without real intellectual freedom. The system rewards obedience, not originality. Meanwhile, the emotional side of control is equally powerful. While ignorance defends the system, emotion fuels the attack. Through fear, outrage, guilt, and shame, people are manipulated into defending the very structures that disempower them. You're taught to ridicule dissenters, mock critical thinkers, and fear any idea that threatens your comfort zone. In this way, society becomes its own prison guard, policing itself with pride. This isn't just control. This is a masterpiece of psychological design. And this is just the beginning. Let's begin with a fundamental truth. Emotions are the native language of your subconscious. Logic comes later, if at all. The true architects of influence know this. In fact, they rely on it. Whoever controls emotions controls decisions. Whoever controls decisions controls the future. So here's the real question. Do you truly control your emotions, your choices, your beliefs, your reactions? Behavioral neuroscience has spent decades studying this, and the answer is far more unsettling than most people would like to believe. According to Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize-winning economist and author of Thinking Fast and Slow, the vast majority of decisions we make are not rational. They happen in the blink of an eye, milliseconds before our conscious mind is even aware of them. The engineers of consent don't just know this, they've turned it into a weapon. This is where modern marketing enters the picture. But this isn't advertising as you know it. This is psychology sharpened into a surgical instrument. Every image you see in an ad has been meticulously chosen, not for its aesthetics, but for its emotional payload. A laughing baby, a loyal dog, a mother holding her child. These aren't feel-good visuals. They're subconscious detonators designed to trigger primal instincts and drive automatic behavior. Have you ever bought something on impulse, then asked yourself, why did I even get this? That wasn't you being irresponsible. That was the system doing exactly what it was built to do. You weren't persuaded. You were primed, emotionally manipulated through triggers you didn't even notice. They bypassed your logic and went straight for the controls panel of your unconscious. Like pressing buttons on a joystick, they knew exactly where to poke, what to show, what emotion to provoke, and when to do it. And it doesn't stop at consumer behavior. One of the most cunning and devastating strategies is the deliberate sexualization of modern culture. This isn't just a byproduct of freedom or artistic expression. It's a calculated social engineering tactic. Hypersexualized media serves two strategic goals. First, it's wildly profitable. That's obvious. But the second is more sinister. It traps the majority of the population on the second tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, stuck in survival and pleasure, unable to climb toward consciousness, purpose, or self-actualization. Let's break it down. For men, this hypersexualization drains their vitality quite literally. Pornography and endless sexual stimulation rob them of energy, ambition, clarity, and inner strength. When constantly emptied, this energy cannot rise into intellect, purpose, or personal power. Instead, what remains are fatigued, fragmented, and controllable men, easily distracted, easily pacified. But what about women? The attack is different, but just as damaging. In women, feminine energy, the intuitive, creative, sacred connection to the self is corrupted through objectification and constant comparison. What's sold as empowerment often becomes a form of subtle enslavement. The result, disconnection from true feminine power, replaced by a nagging emptiness. And to fill that void, society offers the perfect solution: compulsive consumption, shopping, trends, validation, external gratification. This toxic cycle feeds itself. The deeper the disconnection, the stronger the compulsion to consume. The more we consume, the more disconnected we feel. It's a loop designed to produce profit, not empowerment. Now look closer. This isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a larger ecosystem, one built with precision, one where even your cultural maturity is deliberately sabotaged. Welcome to cultural infantilization. Today's movies, music, and digital content increasingly treat adults like children. But this isn't about fun or nostalgia. It's a psychological strategy rooted in control. As Edward Bernays wrote in Propaganda, adults analyze, criticize, and make autonomous decisions. But children, they obey. They follow authority without question. They accept simple stories in place of complex truths. So what happens when you flood society with shallow entertainment, basic language, and content that rewards surface-level emotion? You get emotionally stunted adults unable to reason through complexity, susceptible to fear, addicted to simplicity, and dependent on external authority. Think about it. Watch any modern political debate. It doesn't resemble thoughtful dialogue. It looks more like a schoolyard argument. Politicians act like toddlers hurling insults instead of ideas. And the crowd cheers not because of the content, but because they've been trained to respond to emotional spectacle. But why is this immaturity encouraged? Because immature minds are easier to control. And here's the masterstroke: social unrest isn't a glitch in the system. It's a feature. It's engineered. Governments and corporate powers have learned to cultivate tension, racial, political, ideological, only to swoop in with solutions that were pre-planned from the beginning. This tactic is known as problem reaction solution. First create or amplify a problem, then wait for the public to panic, fear, outrage, despair, and finally present the solution you always intended. More surveillance, more restrictions, more control. And the people, they don't resist, they demand it. Why? Because they believe it will make them safe. Turn on your television, flip through the news. What do you see? Violence, tragedy, conflict, fear, over and over again. Not because that's all that's happening, but because fear and anger are the most fertile emotions for manipulation. They strip away reason and turn citizens into reactionary pawns. And as the population trembles, those in power tighten their grip. Even the people you admire, your heroes, idols, public figures, they're not as organic as you think. They're manufactured, carefully chosen, and sculpted to embody the values, behavior, and aspirations the system wants to promote. As researcher Fritz Springmeier explains in his deep investigations into mind control and mass influence, the entertainment industry isn't just about entertainment, it's a conveyor belt. A well-oiled machine that produces icons to shape public perception, sell ideologies, and reinforce narratives. The people we admire most are often the most carefully curated, and through them, the messages of control are whispered into our minds without resistance because we trust them. But don't be fooled. Everything we've seen so far, the manipulation of emotion, the infantilization of culture, the strategic use of fear and fantasy, it's just the beginning. We've only scratched the surface. Because the influence goes deeper into the very institutions that form the foundation of our lives. Finance, healthcare, food, education, even spirituality. All of them infiltrated, all of them weaponized, all of them controlled. But the question is, can we break free? Previously, we exposed how every facet of modern life, entertainment, education, even personal identity is shaped by a silent architecture of control. But the deeper we look, the more we realize this system doesn't just influence behavior. It redefines reality itself. And nowhere is that more evident than in the world of modern medicine. Pharmaceutical corporations don't just sell medication. They sell definitions. They tell us what it means to be healthy, what it means to be sick, and perhaps most dangerously, what it means to be normal. In the hands of these corporations, natural and often fleeting human experiences are pathologized, turned into conditions requiring lifelong chemical intervention. A bout of sadness. That's not a phase, it's clinical depression. A quiet child who prefers solitude, social anxiety disorder. A distracted mind overstimulated by screens, ADHD. The entire spectrum of human feeling is being compressed into a pill-shaped solution. But why? Because this medicalization of everyday existence serves more than just the purpose of healing, it serves power. It generates billions in profit. It fosters long-term chemical dependency, and most insidiously, it shifts the blame inward. What was once considered a spiritual crisis or a social dysfunction is now treated as a biological defect. The solution, not reflection, not transformation, not community, but a prescription, a diagnosis, a drug. And the same logic is mirrored in what we eat. The modern food industry is not about nourishment, it's about control. By leveraging deep insights from neuroscience, specifically how the brain's reward systems respond to certain flavors, companies have engineered products designed to override your natural instincts. Think about that irresistible combination of sugar, salt, and fat found in most processed foods. It's not accidental. It's the result of decades of research into how to hijack your cravings. You're not eating for hunger. You're eating because your biology has been hacked. And the outcome is devastating chronic fatigue, mood swings, brain fog, and emotional instability. States of being that don't just affect your health, they shut down critical thinking. They make it harder to question, to focus, to act. A population dulled by its own diet is easier to pacify, to distract, to keep dependent. But here's the terrifying part. It's not just corporations or political elites behind this system. At every level of the social pyramid, from media hosts to school teachers to well-meaning friends and family, there are individuals consciously or unconsciously enforcing this agenda. It's like a network of dominoes, each one tipping into the next, all playing a part in sustaining the illusion. So where do you run when the entire environment is part of the machinery? Nowhere. This isn't a system you escape. It's one you wake up inside. Let's look at this through a metaphor. In a circus, a tiger is beaten and whipped until it learns to obey. Pain conditions it to perform. But there's a more effective and sinister type of control. The best tiger isn't the one that fears the whip. It's the one that no longer needs it. The one that polices itself. The one that has internalized its training so deeply that it chooses to perform, believes obedience is its nature. That's the goal of the engineering of consent. To create a society where people self-regulate, where they self-censor, where they buy exactly what they're supposed to buy, think exactly what they're supposed to think, and most chillingly believe it was their own choice all along. That's how control becomes invisible, how slavery disguises itself as freedom. But don't lose hope, because even the most sophisticated control system has one fatal vulnerability: it cannot override the natural rhythm of human awakening. Despite all efforts to keep us sedated, distracted, and afraid, something deeper is stirring. We are in a moment of collective transition, a shift in awareness that cannot be stopped by algorithms or pharmaceuticals. Every day, more people begin to question, to feel the cracks in the illusion. And with each awakening, the spell weakens. The shadow loses strength. But don't confuse this with revolution as we know it. True transformation doesn't come from protests or political coups. As George Orwell so powerfully illustrated in Animal Farm, replacing the ruler without changing the consciousness of the ruled simply recycles the same oppression in new forms. The faces may change, but the chains remain. So what's the real revolution? It's the one that happens in silence, in solitude, in the individual mind. It has no leaders, no flags, no slogans, because the moment it has any of these, it becomes a target, corrupted, filtrated, broken from within. The revolution begins when you choose to break your own chains, when you stop waiting for someone to save you, when you walk away from the life that was designed to keep you asleep. When you say no more, that right there is the moment you take your power back. So ask yourself, are you still pointing fingers at the architects of the system? Or are you focused on your own role in maintaining it? Because here's the truth, their fate is already sealed. The consequences of their actions are unfolding whether we witness them or not. The real question, the only one that matters, is this: what will you choose to do now? As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, there are some things in our society and our world to which I am proud to be maladjusted. To conform is to comply. To comply is to surrender. To resist even quietly is to become in the eyes of the system a threat. And sometimes the smallest act of resistance is the most powerful. Every time you pause before indulging an impulse, every time you question the narrative the media feeds you, every time you invest in real knowledge instead of shallow distraction, you are participating in the real revolution. Because the engineering of consent only works in darkness. Once exposed, it loses its grip. Awareness is the antidote. Knowledge is the weapon. Understanding is liberation. So I leave you with one final question, one that only you can answer. What kind of tiger are you? Are you the one that sleeps in its cage, believing the bars are there for its own good? Or are you the one ready to reclaim your strength, your clarity, and your sovereignty? If you are the latter, if you're ready to rise, then I offer you the most powerful tool of all knowledge. Discover the Master Key, an extraordinary, deeply detailed guide to the 7 fundamental laws that structure our universe. These ancient principles brought forth by Hermes Trismegistus are the pillars of all creation. And those who master them don't just survive reality, they shape it. If you're ready to unlock that power, the link is on screen and in the description. Thank you for watching and for daring to question.